Welcome to FailCraft, the podcast where we dive into the messy, real side of success and explore how setbacks become the stepping stones for growth and clarity. I'm your host, Ezekiel Iferia, and today's guest is Marita Littauer. She is the author of the 20-year bestseller, Wired That Way, and an expert on how human personalities interact. For decades, she has helped people avoid relational disasters by teaching them how to understand the people around them. But Marita doesn't just teach reinvention, she lives it. In 2016, after a massive career in writing and speaking, she completely pivoted to flipping houses and managing remodels. Now she is the founder of Living Your Best Life 60 Plus, actively dismantling the societal myth that our lives wind down as we age. She is here to talk about why we marry our opposites, the art of the late in life pivot, and why your third act is actually your sweet spot. So, Marita, I am super excited to welcome you to the show. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Nice introduction.
Great to have you here. The pleasure is mine. So let's get things started. You wrote the bestseller Wired That Way. So can you give us an overview of this book? What's it about? What was your motivation behind writing that book? And who were the ideal readers you had in mind?
Okay, well, the easy part is who the ideal readers are because it's really everyone. It's primarily adults who have realized that there are people out there who are different from them. And as they realize that people are different from them, they begin to realize that maybe the way I treat this person needs to be different from the way I treat this person. And so the book addresses a concept that is known kind of universally as the personalities or the four basic personality types. And it's based on a concept that's more than 2,000 years old that was originally developed by one of the great Greek thinkers known simply as Hippocrates. And Hippocrates back then observed that people were different. Now, when I speak on this topic, when I'm giving a speech on it, I always start by asking, how many of you out there have noticed there are people who are different from you? And everybody raises their hand because everybody has noticed that. And then I ask, how many of you live with, work with, or used to live with that person who's different from you? They all raise their hand. And then I say, how many of you have ever tried to change that person? Again, they keep their hand raised. And then when I say, how many of you ever tried to change that person? Excuse me, I already asked you. And I say, how often has it worked? They shout back because they're with me by now. Never. It's never worked to try to change those people. And so the concept behind this book is to understand those four basic personality types, and especially to be able to identify that personality type in others. I chose to write this book because my mother has written 40, she's now deceased, but she had written 40 books, and her best-selling book was on this topic of the personalities. And from the time I was a young teenager, I would go with her to her speaking engagements, and I was in the back of the room selling books and little cassette tapes and what they were back in the day. And I would have people come to me and ask me questions that she didn't answer. And so I wrote this book to kind of encompass all of those answers. My mother wrote a book called Personality Plus. She wrote Personality Plus for parents. She wrote Personality Plus for couples. She wrote communication or personalities in the workplace. And people used to come back to the book table where I was and say, do I have to buy all of these books? And so I wrote Wired That Way to be kind of the all-inclusive book, but that also answered questions that her book did not answer for people. And of course, I'm delighted to go into a quick overview of the four different personality types and how you identify other people's personalities. But I know we don't have a long time together today.
Yes, but could you just, touch on them for a few minutes? Let's get some value there.
Of course, we do have a personality profile, and I have a paper copy of it in my hand. We have an electronic copy of this online as well. And my father created this personality profile back when I was 9 years old, and I'm 67 now. So you can tell this has been in use for a really long time. And while the packaging has changed and some of the supplemental support material that comes with it has been upgraded, the actual personality profile that is featured here has been in use for more than 60 years. And so, excuse me, almost 60 years. And so this is one way someone can identify their personality type. And the basic personality types are, I start with the popular sanguine, represented by the color yellow. And I start with the popular sanguine because that person's the most obvious to identify. We are the talkers of life. We're the loud, outgoing, fun-loving, extroverted type of person. Popular, sanguine. The word sanguine is the original Greek word, but because that doesn't mean much to most people, I've added to it a modern day adjective of popular and a color. And I tell people it doesn't matter whether you think of it as the Greek word, the modern day adjective, or the color. What matters is relationships, not the label. So that's the popular sanguine. Opposite of that is the perfect melancholy. And that's the deep, thoughtful, introspective kind of person that is represented by the color blue, deep blue, like the ocean. This person tends to be a perfectionist. They are good at numbers and math and things like that. Science, all of those things are good for the perfect melancholy. Then I like to go to the powerful choleric, represented by the color red. And that's the strong, driven, goal-oriented person in life. They can tend to be a little bit bossy and controlling, and they tend to be offensive to other people. And they don't understand why they're offensive because their attitude would be, well, you always know where you stand with me. But other people find their harsh tone to be offensive. That's the powerful choleric personality. And then the opposite of the powerful choleric is the peaceful phlegmatic, represented by the color green. And they are the background person, the low-key person, the gentle person. They're the ones that if you said to them, would you like tea or coffee? They would tend to say, oh, I don't care. It doesn't matter, whichever is easiest. Of course, like the color wheel, none of us are exactly one type. We may be a variation of those different personality types, but most of us have a pretty strong primary personality and then a secondary that may be, as in my case, close to 50-50. I'm the top two, the popular sanguine and the powerful choleric. Or someone may be more like 90% one and 5% another. So we're all unique, but this just gives us kind of a handle to look at some basic personality traits.
All right, all right. Thank you very much for walking us through that. So you teach that we tend to marry our opposites. So why do the exact personality traits why do the exact personality traits that attracts us to someone in the beginning become the very things that drives us crazy later?
So true, so true. Someone like me who's the strong, fun-loving, outgoing person, I know that I need someone to kind of ground me, even though I maybe don't consciously know it. I subconsciously am aware that I need someone who can ground me and help me get places on time and do all the number stuff. And my husband, who is the opposite from me, even though I teach this, and you might say, well, you should know better, Marita. And I should, but our heart doesn't always do what's logical, does it? And so I married someone who is opposite from me, both in the first marriage and in the second marriage. I did it again. And my husband, though, he said to me one day recently, if it wasn't for you, I would probably never leave this house. He realizes that he's an introvert. He realizes that he would sit in his recliner watching TV all day, every day, if I didn't make him get up and go out and do things. And so I like to look at it this way. I like to use my hands as kind of a graph because they're always with me. If this is my strengths and these are my weaknesses, and my husband, these are his strengths and these are his weaknesses, and I'm pointing to my fingers, the tips of my fingers, and the base of my fingers. When we come together, we bring a full complement of skills to the table.
Did
So
I
we
lose
really
you?
do balance each other out. However, those very things that attract us to one another are those things, as you said, that become a distraction. I recently, just yesterday, told my husband that I was going to a certain event last night. And he said, "Are we ever going to stay home?" Now, we had been somewhere Tuesday night. Last night was Thursday night. We were home Sunday. We were home Monday. We were home Wednesday. But he was like, "Do we have to?" And I said, "No, I know you don't want to go. You're not going. I'm going." So I've had to learn to get my fill of fun with my friends because my husband doesn't want to be dragged everywhere I want to go. So if we don't understand that about each other, it's very easy for me to like think about him and think, "You're no fun anymore. I don't want," and get unhappy. But when I understand this is how he's hardwired, and he understands that I need to go have fun with my friends, and it's okay if he doesn't come with me all the time.
All right. That very much explains it. So, society often tells women that life essentially winds down after 60. You completely pivoted your career to flip houses later in life. Is buying into that expiration date one of the biggest failure of our third act?
Yeah, I think that's probably a good way to put it, is that if she has resources, if she has health and she has time, once we retire and the kids are out of the house, the kids are grown, many women feel like, "Oh, my life is over. The kids are gone. I don't have my job anymore. I don't have my identity." And the whole purpose of my blog that I've put together is to encourage that woman to realize what's ahead of her, what's available, how many choices and options and travel and interesting things there are for her to do, even though I have many friends at this point who are widows, and some are divorced, some are widows, some are married, but we all are at a place in life where there are new opportunities available for us that are totally different than what we could have done before. And so on my blog, which I call the Best Life Project, Best Life with a hyphen, bestlifeproject.com, on my blog, I have a variety of different contributors, other women who have different life experiences from what I do, but who are also in that 60 plus place. Some are over 70, some are 61 or 62, but we're all in that place where we can really look forward to life ahead of us. And we write different things. I publish about 2 different posts a week from different contributors that address that sweet spot of life where you have time, health, and resources.
All right. All
I know
right.
you're a
So,
young man, that may not relate to you, but
all right. Yeah. So you took over the family legacy of the personalities from your mother. Yeah. So
mhm.
is it difficult to forge your own authentic identity when you are carrying the weight of a famous parent's life work?
Well, I think some people might feel that way. I've been blessed that I have not felt that way. I started working with my mother literally, as I mentioned, when I was a young teen. And then throughout the majority of my adult life, we have worked together and we have done seminars where we've trained people to be speakers and writers. She and I have both been speaking. We've done things on our own and we've done things together. And as she got older, we used to do this 3-day seminar where we train people to be speakers and writers. And that seminar was called CLASS, Christian Leaders, Authors, and Speakers Seminar. And as she got older in that seminar, I took over more and more of the training. Originally, she probably did 90% of the training and I probably did 10%. But as she got older, and wasn't able to be on the stage all day long for 3 days in a row, I assumed more of the responsibility. So in our case, it was a very natural transition. In fact, I mentioned at the beginning that we have the personality profile available in an online version. My mother lived with me for the last 2 years of her life. She died at 92. And literally while I was sitting by her chair or her bedside, I was developing the website and the online profile. Now, the profile itself, as I mentioned earlier, is the same content that my father created nearly 60 years ago, but turning it into an electronic version was a expensive proposition and a time-consuming proposition. And I was literally doing that while I was sitting by her chair in the last months of her life. And she
All
was very
right.
proud of that. She was very proud of that I was keeping that legacy alive.
All right.
And I'm honored. I'm honored to do so.
Indeed, she would be very, very proud. Flipping houses and managing remodels is a massive shift from speaking on stages. Did you have to overcome the fear of looking like a beginner again in the brand new industry when you first started that?
Yeah, I would say definitely that was the case because, I mean, admittedly, I've done it for almost a decade now. I'm now retired from that, but I did it for almost a decade and I started flipping houses. Now, in the beginning, I did a lot of the work, but not all of it because I've always been handy in my family. I was the most mechanical in the family and the most handy at things like that. But I had guys, and it's a long story how I found my David and then my Josh and my guys that were so great. And I had the vision. I had the opportunity to buy the house because flipping a house, you have to buy it first. And
Yeah.
I had the opportunity to buy the house. And then I had the vision for what we were going to do. And I had the resources to be able to, buy what we needed to do. And my workers, they didn't have the vision or the resources, but they had the hard skills that I needed. And that first house we did together, I still drive by it somewhat frequently, that very first house that we did together. And Facebook brings up memories for me of, remember 9 years ago you did this. And it's kind of sweet to see. And what my David and I did together. But I learned a lot and he taught me. And I would say, well, help me understand, why are you doing that? And so I learned a lot. So I did 5 houses that we flipped. And I will tell you, it is not like they show you on television. It is not at all like they show you on television, but I did 5 houses successfully. They don't make anywhere near the money they show you on television. And probably if I really counted up how many hours I put into it and what I got out of it, I probably could have earned more money at McDonald's, but I would not have had near the good time I had because I majored in interior design way back in college. I didn't graduate, but I did major in interior design and I took all of the interior design classes. I didn't take any of the history or the English or the math, any of those boring classes, but I did take all of the interior design classes in college. So this was something that was kind of always in me. And when I remarried, my husband got an inheritance shortly after we got married that gave me the cash to be able to flip houses. And then I started doing it for other people. I never intended to. But, someone who knew someone who knew someone said, oh, Marita could do that for you. And then, so the last half of my construction career was remodeling, basically kitchens and bathrooms for people, because that's mostly what people want is kitchens and bathrooms. And that interior design background I had really came into play. So as you mentioned in the beginning, I've had kind of a lot of different shifts in career roles.
All right. So, you call the 60 plus years the sweet spot of life. So, how do people in that range shift their mindset from grieving their lost youth to actually utilizing the freedom, resources, and wisdom they finally have?
Well, that's very well put, Ezekiel. I appreciate that phrasing. And I think obviously it's easier for some people than others. We
Mm-hmm.
had a blog post posted around Valentine's Day on after you've been through a divorce, that Valentine's Day can be very difficult for you because you're grieving that loss. And one of my other contributors responded to that post saying, thank you for sharing that because Valentine's Day is really hard for me. And the author who wrote that post about Valentine's Day being difficult offered several things to help you reframe your mind. And I think for anyone, if they were to read the posts, as I said, usually they come out about twice a week. If you were to read the post, you would find many stories and circumstances that you relate to. And you go, oh, that's exactly what I'm feeling. And you would read what that person has to say and really gain insights from it. The one I just posted one today, and as I was reading it to get it posted, I thought, this is such valuable information, and it's something that I need to constantly be reminded of. And so I'm sure Ezekiel, as you talk about FailCraft, that when it's so easy to focus on the negative and to be down. But if we can fulfill our mind, and that's a lot of what you're doing with your podcast, I believe, is you're trying to offer positive reinforcements, steps, tools, guidance to help people and lift them up and see perhaps a new beginning where they didn't see there was one before. And that's what my little blog does, just to a kind of different demographic than is your ideal demographic.
All right, all right. That was an amazing response. So, for the listener, Marita, who is approaching 60 in our audience and feels like their best years and biggest contributions are behind them now. So, what's the first step they can take to reinvent their next chapter?
Well, I think understanding their personality, honestly, is a big part of it, because based on how you're naturally wired, and my book is called Wired That Way. So based on how you're naturally wired is going to impact what your next step is going to look like. So I think that's an important part first. And then to look at the options that are available to you. For example, I just started literally a couple weeks ago where I live in Lubbock, Texas. We have a large performing arts hall. You may or may not know, and it may not matter to you, but Buddy Holly, the kind of the father of rock and roll, was born in Lubbock, Texas. And so we now have the new performing arts center is called the Buddy Holly Hall. And the big shows come through. Now we in Lubbock get the big shows on weekdays, and they go to like Dallas and Phoenix on weekends. But I just started volunteering as an usher at the Buddy Holly Hall. I've never done anything like, well, I do. I'm a greeter at my church. So I guess I have done something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I've done one show so far, but a couple days ago, I sat down on the website and I signed up for shows through June that I'm going to volunteer to usher, and I get to see those shows free. Well, see, my personality, that's really fun to me. You can probably tell I'm excited about that opportunity. Other people, that would be totally not interesting. The thought of having to go and greet people and smile and, look at their tickets and tell them where their seats are. For me, I'm like, oh, that's fabulous. So that's why I say we're understanding your understanding what your personality is really important. For some people, it might be spending time with their grandchildren, being able to travel to go see this grandchild and going to go travel to see that grandchild. It just depends on what your personality is and your skill set is. And then watching other people, I think, is really important. And that's why I have those contributors to my blog who are people who have been there. Like your guests on FailCraft, they're people who have been there. They understand. And so the women who write, and I occasionally have some men write too, because they have insights just as well. And so we bring in different experts that can address, not everybody's going to love every idea. But when there's a lot of different ideas there, and I think that's important, look at what's out there for you and look what works with your personality type. And, depending on, like, I like going to these shows, but I don't have enough money to go to all these shows. So I found a way to go to them free by working as an usher. So I'm just saying that to say, look at what you like to do and see if there's a way that you can do it that will work for you to make your life fulfilling in this latter phase.
All right, all right. That was another very helpful response for someone listening in our audience. Indeed. So, lastly, Marita, for listeners who want to take the personality profile or explore your 60 plus community, or just go connect with you online to follow what you're doing. So, where is the best place for them to go?
I kind of live my entire life on Facebook. I do use Instagram as well, but I'm much more active on Facebook. I'm not sure why, but somehow Instagram doesn't work as well for what I'm doing as Facebook does. And I put recipes on there because I'm a hobby chef. That's another thing I love to do. Love to have parties. And so on Facebook, I post like I'll post this interview once it's available. I will post that on Facebook, but I'll also put it on my website, and that is thepersonalities.com. And like I said, that's what we call the 4 personalities, is thepersonalities.com. And on that website, I have a free resources tab, and I have recordings of speeches that I've done. I have the links to many of the podcasts that I've done, and I will add this one to it. But also, people can go there to thepersonalities.com and take the personality profile. It's $4. So it's a very cost effective. Many of these personality typing systems are $35, $50, $250 even to take the personality profile. So the little $4 is very cost effective. And that's what's on the personalities. My book, Wired That Way, you can buy it on my website, but honestly, you're better off to buy it on Amazon. They'll get it to you cheaper and quicker than I will. And so if you just want one book, I encourage people go to Amazon. But like yesterday, I sent 100 personality profiles to a church in North Dakota. I sent 25 of them to someone in South Dakota and 10 of them to someone else in New York. And I've got 300 I'm ready to ship to someone in Malaysia. So you just never know. But if you want quantities like that, you're best to talk to me directly. And then you asked about the Best Life Project. That's simply bestlifeproject.com. But best and life are hyphenated because best life, not hyphenated, was taken. So that will take you somewhere else. So Best Life Project with a hyphen between best and life.
All right, Marita, thank you very much for sharing all of those in great details here to us. I'll add them to the details in the show notes of this podcast so that listeners can easily go check them out. It's been a truly powerful conversation with you here today, and I am very excited having you as a guest on the show. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ezekiel. Can I mention one more thing real quick?
Yeah,
No.
sure.
Yeah, okay. For your audience, I wrote a blog post that I think might be interesting to them because it's kind of how I dealt with some of the failures in my life and moved on. And it's a blog post I wrote called My Life, or not, it's not my life, excuse me. It's just Life in Chapters. And that's one that your audience in particular, I think, might find interesting.
All right. So, where can they go check that out?
That's at bestlifeproject.com.
All
And
right.
there's, of course, on the side, there's a thing you can scroll through, find my name as the author, and then click on that, and then you can find that blog post easily.
Fantastic. Thank you again, Marita, for sharing that with our audience. It's been a great time talking to you.
Thank you, Ezekiel.